this is your host, Julia Napini. I am a clinical and forensic social worker who owns a counseling practice and a consulting business. In this show, we discuss the challenges of being successful in business while maintaining your integrity and staying true to yourself. Join me while I interview other professionals and share insights from life and experience. Let's talk about RingRx, our latest sponsor. RingRx is a high-quality, HIPAA-compliant telephone, text, and fax communications platform. They provide seamless, cost-effective communications for behavioral therapists, medical practices, hospitals, and other healthcare providers. RingRx is designed for modern healthcare environments. They offer customizable features like a phone app, automated patient outreach, voicemail, after-hours call routing, and top-quality desk phones. Try RingRx for free today at ringrx.com. And if you sign up using the code CLIMB, you'll get 15% off your monthly bill forever. Conditions apply. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Compassionate Climb podcast. Today, our guest and I are going to have a conversation about creating next level impact in your business. So this is going to be a good one. Melissa Henry, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to come on. This is exciting.
Absolutely. So I am definitely prioritizing more networking and connections professionally. And we know somebody mutually, Didi Kai, who connected us to one another. And I always find that similar to a client referral, I feel like a podcast guest referral is similar in nature, where somebody saw something that led them to believe that we would be a good match. And as I'm learning more about you, I'm seeing why. So fill the audience in on a little bit of your background, how you got to be doing the work that you're doing now.
Wow, that's just such a loaded question whenever someone's asking that, because you're like, okay, how much do I tell? How far back do I go?
Yeah.
Let me see if I can condense. So I used to be an accountant. I'm still a CPA, like I still have that designation. So I spent about like 20 years or so in that industry. And, I never think that anything is a mistake. I mean, there was so many things I learned from that. And I know that a lot of that really kind of built into what I do now. But there came a time 7 years ago, to be exact, when I decided to go full-time in my business. At the time, I was a photographer. I've loved photography my whole life. So that's what I did, but it morphed into, having worked with a lot of business owners for their photography, for their brand photography. It morphed into me like learning way more about what brand strategy really was, helping them with that side of things, because many of them came to me not knowing what their brand was. So really hard to actually create imagery for someone when you're not really sure what to create, other than portraits, which doesn't tell a story really. So spent a lot of time really kind of digging there, building my own brand, etc., until the point about 4 years ago when a client came to me and said, well, would you coach me on how I can build my personal brand? And for like when he said that, I was like, can I do that? And then I was like, yeah, I do. I can. I have a methodology and I know what I'm talking about. And so that really morphed into kind of slowly, gradually getting away from the photography and spending more and more and more time on the strategy component of it. And I know we're going to get into this, but like, it's not your logo, it's not your colors, it's not your photos, all the things, but we're going to get there. But that's where I am today.
Yeah, no, that was great. So
Thanks.
I feel like with that being our launch pad, what are some of the key things that you've been noticing that business owners are missing when it comes to branding? I mean, obviously those that maybe haven't put a ton of thought into it, or maybe have an idea of what it is, but it isn't. What are some key things that are lacking out there?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that always comes to mind for me is what I just said. Everybody goes, okay, I'm going to start a business and I need a website and I need a logo and I need to figure out what my colors are because that's my brand.
Yeah.
And, yeah, okay. So some visual is important, right? People need to kind of have a place for them to go to find out what you do. But I never recommend anyone start with like a full visual brand right off the bat. And here's why. Usually when you get started in business, and I know we're talking to an audience that's kind of runs the gamut here, but from that perspective, they're not, they don't kind of really know what they're doing yet, like who they're really serving, how they're really serving, what makes them different against other people doing similar things. And so, all of those things I just said, that's foundational. And that actually does help you build the visual side later. So, when I say brand and when I say brand strategy, I'm talking about being super clear about what the ultimate vision is for you.
Mm-hmm.
Not your goals, but like, what is it that you really want to do in the world? And that's a huge question for a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people.
Yeah.
Most people will not right off the bat be able to tell you that. It's purpose. It's why am I here?
Mm-hmm.
And that's super important because then you're developing out what the mission is.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do I get to that ultimate vision,
Yeah.
right? And then, only then, do you start looking at, well, what are the goals and milestones that I need to put in place in order
Mm.
to get there?
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean, just going to say this because it's coming to mind, doesn't mean you have to have the whole thing mapped out like the rest of your life, but you do have to have a concept of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Without that, and by the way, I'm going to say this, it's a huge, I just had a conversation about this right before we got on, and that is this is not just about marketing.
Mm-hmm.
This is quite literally foundational for almost every single thing you're doing in your business.
Mm-hmm.
And here's why. Have you ever like worked for a company where you don't know what, like you don't really have a sense of why you're there like you know what you're doing, you know what your job
Yeah.
is, but you're like, I don't really understand why I'm important. Like they could just hire anybody. Why am I important, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's because the company hasn't really demonstrated what their vision and mission really is, and
Mm-hmm.
it hasn't shown you how you fit into that puzzle. Why is the fact that you show up every day very important
Yeah.
for them to grow and to make money and to serve more people and all those things? So that's what a brand does for you. So it's not just, hey, I got a brand, I can go out and market myself. That's what everybody says the first thing that they want to do when that's the purpose of the brand. And I'm going to say that, hey, no, the brand is way more important than that. It really does help you make decisions and it does help you bring in the right people to support you as you grow.
Mm-hmm. So, would you define brand as including not only that vision, but the mission that's going to help you get there? And considering the level of impact that you want to make, is it kind of all rolled in there? And what else would you include in your
Yeah.
definition?
Well, okay, so I'm kind of like my approach to this is kind of huge. It's kind of overarching. And
Yeah.
so depending on the client that I'm working with is what we will focus most on. But I will tell you, I've never had a client come in who had a fully defined vision. They had a concept, many of
Mhm.
them. But once we started really getting into it, they started really understanding what it was. So I'll give you just sort of like the list. How about
Okay.
that?
Sure.
Okay. So, fully defined vision, which is the North Star, which
Hmm.
helps you understand what's your purpose? Why am I doing this? The mission, well, what am I doing right now to actually make that vision happen? The values, what are my core values? And you'd be surprised how many people will think they have their values set, but they actually never really define them.
Hmm.
The core values, believe it or not, I'm able to extract those based on conversations we have about the vision. I can pull all that out. And not only like what are they, but how do you express them in your marketing? How do you express them with clients? Okay. Then after that, we're starting to look at once you have those three things, you're going to start to sort of suss out who the right clients are for you.
Sure.
But we do a deep dive into who are the ideal clients for you for this big vision. Okay. When we figure out who they are, like the demographics is the term we use, but It's the factual information about them. Where are they? Like what industry are they in? Are they married or single, or what, divorced, or whatever? What is the situation there? If it applies, what, like, just what level of revenue are they making? Where do they live? There's a lot of those sort of things, and not every single thing applies, but we go deep there. Once we have that defined, we can really start to look at what are the events that are going on in their lives right now. If we go niche enough, we can figure it out. And I'll give you an example if you want me to in a little bit. But
Mm-hmm.
if we go really niche there, we can actually get inside their head and we can actually start getting emotional with them.
Mm.
So this is so important because everybody buys with emotion. I don't care who you are. You use logic to back it up, but you buy with the emotion piece.
Mm-hmm.
We call that rationalization, right? And then after that, we start to get into why you? Why are you different from someone else doing the same thing?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I just had this conversation yesterday with a client, and what was interesting to me was she gave me a competitor to check out. So I did a competition analysis for her, and we kind of did it real time. And I showed her, this person's not your competition. There's like several reasons why not. And then she was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe it. Like, she isn't. I know why I'm different." Yeah, you do. Now go talk about it. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
that's your USP, your unique selling proposition.
Okay.
Excuse me. I have a little frog today. I was sick for like 2 weeks, so it's still kind of hanging out there. So, anyways, it's really like why you different? What are you bringing to the table that no one else can replicate? And when we talk branding, that's you. Like, you are the thumbprint. There's no one else that's like you, with your experience, with your education, with your skills, with your talents, with, the things that you see, your personality, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
That's is what you're how you're creating that USP. From there, we can develop out several things. We can talk about, okay, what's your offer and how do we make that offer really irresistible to the person you really want? You can talk about the customer journey. So how do we bring someone from not knowing that they even have a problem all the way to buying from you?
Mm-hmm.
So we also develop out a really impactful expert bio. We also look at what's your brand voice and tone, and how do we come across there in all of your content, in the way that you do your videos, in the way that you have even sales calls with people. So you see, it's it's really holistic.
Yeah.
And only then do we start talking about visuals. And we start taking them through the process of defining what their visuals should look like for them, because it's all based upon all that other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I know I've talked too much. So
No, that's why I have you here. So that was such a helpful breakdown, and I feel like that really illuminated your methodology and your process, but also, kind of what is important. I think we all look for this roadmap and step by step, and what do we
yeah,
do first and then next? And you laid it out there in a way that's been different than I've heard it before. So the part
ah,
that I hone in on, and I'd love to delve a little bit deeper,
sure.
the therapist in me, obviously starting off my consulting business, working with a lot of mental health professionals, and now I've broadened the scope and work with entrepreneurs in general. But therapists not only struggle a lot with the business side of what we do because we don't have that training, but I would say
Hmm.
marketing would be next in line.
Hmm.
It is not natural or like an inherent skill for someone that I found that's trained in that realm to maybe feel comfortable or to be natural in marketing. And I'm sure that that's the case with other professions as well. I just know for us it is. So when you
Hmm.
start talking about what sets somebody apart, and you start going through their education, their experience, their skills, I feel like those are aspects that we can maybe feel a little bit more comfortable to put down on paper, on a resume, talk about in an
Hmm.
interview. But
Hmm.
beyond that, are there any strategies that you use with your clients that really help to illuminate what sets them apart beyond those pieces?
Hmm. Yeah, like, it's sometimes I don't ever go into their USP until later on.
Okay.
Mostly because it's like, as we start diving deeper and as they start getting more confident about what they're telling me, they actually start to understand why they're different. Like,
Mhm.
as I was saying, my client yesterday, she was
Right. For the
seeing, oh my God,
comparison.
I'm different. I'm so different. And I was like, yes, you're so different. And
Mhm.
then she's excited. And then she's like, yeah, let's do this. Let me see if I can like back end it and give kind of an example that I think actually makes a whole lot of sense. One thing to consider about what makes you unique, your USP, is you want it to be specific. So it's something that, when someone hears it, they're like, oh, okay, I get that. Very specific. You want it to be you want it to be what's the other ones that I'm trying to think about what I
Yeah.
usually tell people. Specific. You want it to be defensible. So like if someone else came in, it would be really hard to replicate that,
Hmm.
right? And really we are all different and it will come out. It's not that difficult. It'll seem that way because we don't see ourselves as others do. So it's really helpful to have someone else help you with this. But that's the second piece. And the third piece is it has to be relevant to the people you're trying to attract. So you see why this doesn't come until later after we've gone through the other stuff. So literally, let me give you an example because I think this is kind of cool. So let's say that you are a therapist. You've had the psychological background, like you've had all this experience, all this education. But let's say that you also kind of pivoted a bit and you became a financial advisor. Weird, right? Like that's totally different. So, how many people out there, this is very defensible, how many people out there have both a psychology background and a financial education, right? Probably not many, and that's hard to replicate. So, you got the defensible side of it. The second thing would be, is it relevant to your audience? Well, okay, if what you do is you teach, let's say, women to have a better relationship with money, and you go into the issues that people have, the traumas they have around money, and you help with that side of things, then it's definitely relevant, right? And then is it specific? Yeah, sure is.
Hmm.
I mean, you can go out there and start telling people like I am the only, financial advisor therapist out there,
Hmm.
right? Who deals with women and money trauma or
Yeah.
something. So that's just I think a good example to kind of
Yeah.
illustrate that. Did I answer your question? Because now I feel like I
Yeah.
went a little bit off the
No, I
rails.
think that's really helpful. And you've already kind of got the gears turning in my mind for myself. And I think even for some of my clients of how I may be able to help them get there. And then I can see how you'd want that to shine through in everything, not just the visuals, but then it's going to come through in how they introduce themselves and how they speak on their work and what's in their copy. So you
Mhm,
also mentioned story in the beginning. And I can
mhm.
understand why story is so important with branding and marketing in general, but how do you weave all of that in and encourage your clients to do that?
Mm. So story to me does come out. It comes out in several ways. So obviously, when we're talking about vision, there is a discussion around kind of their like how do they get here? Kind of like what you do with all your podcast guests, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a bit of a story that comes out. We also do focus more, I think, on how are you bringing out what you've done, what's happened to you, your experiences and things, and how do those connect with your clients. I'm a big fan of that being a part of your content
Mhm.
and also a part of any discussion that you have with a potential client, just getting that kind of connection with them, and it's how you get to the emotion too. So
Mhm.
it's really important. I would say that I don't have like in this particular case, I don't have like a framework,
Mhm.
but what I'm doing is as we're working through each part of their process, I am identifying those things that are story based. So it comes to mind as I'm talking, okay, this, make note of this. This is a pillar of what you're going to be talking about. This is a story that needs to be brought out in your content, that needs to be maybe even, put on the homepage of your website potentially, or, you
Mhm.
know, whatever. So we definitely have to have that in there because there is no connection without somebody understanding a bit about who you are and why, like why
Mm.
you do what you do. There are other people who are very into story, that will like content creators and writers and things like that who will take it and run with it for
Mhm.
you. But they also need to understand what it is.
Right.
And it comes from all the things I just talked about. So yet another reason why this is foundational stuff.
Definitely. So I'm thinking about even
Mhm.
just 99% of my podcast guests. When they come on here and they're sharing about their background and how they got to be doing what they're doing, almost everyone has some sort of a story about wanting to transform an earlier experience. Maybe they themselves worked for someone that was not in alignment with their values, or it was a workplace that was not the type of workplace that they would ultimately want to be a part of, and they wanted to
Mm.
create something different. Or, there's a whole host of examples. So my thought is, how do you weave that in when you're trying to grab somebody's attention very quickly? Do you
Mm.
find that you encourage people to lead more with elements of their story, more of that kind of value and mission, which I do think very oftentimes, and I'm thinking probably almost always there's connection there. But what do
Mhm.
you lead with? And then I think the other piece I'm thinking is kind of a part two is doing a lot more networking. It's been really fun because I find that with myself, when I'm, let's say, meeting
Mhm.
my partner's coworkers and they ask me
Mm.
what I do, I can very easily give a synopsis, but then I find myself sitting there thinking, do they really care? How in depth do I want to go? How much am I going to share? And
Mm.
so I find that when you go to a networking event or you're on a podcast episode, it's totally different because people are coming there specifically to hear your story. So I think in those two scenarios, it's so different. So what do you encourage people to lead with and I guess really grab the attention of whoever it is they're speaking to if they're more of
Mhm.
that former, where maybe they wouldn't be somebody who's coming specifically to learn about you, but then they're intrigued and they want to know more.
That's such a great question, and it's a huge question because I think it matters in context. So if the context is I'm showing up to a networking meeting,
Mm-hmm.
they don't want to know about me. That's I right off the bat go, I mean, they do, but they're concerned about them. Everyone is concerned about them ultimately themselves. Um, they're altruistic. I know there's lots of altruistic people. My point is that there's always something like if somebody's coming to a networking meeting, they're probably excited about meeting a potential client or someone that they can introduce them to a potential client.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're talking marketing and if we're talking about do you want to make people intrigued and want to lean in and learn more about you, then you ask them questions. Always. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how many networking calls I've been on where I'm the one asking the questions for the longest time until someone finally realizes they've been talking the whole time.
And I'm sure you have some that don't realize because I've been there too.
Yes. Yes. And I have so I'll admit I have an ulterior motive. I'm trying to find out if you have a problem I can solve or someone that I know can solve. That's my point, because
Yeah,
we're all out to solve problems here.
true.
So if you show up to a networking event and you just start asking people's questions, you're going to be the most important and not important, but the most interesting person in the room.
Mm-hmm.
I'm serious.
Nice. And I think it works in both scenarios that I was describing because they have kind of this similar end game. And I definitely think some people are more comfortable talking about themselves than others. And what you're
Yeah.
suggesting is definitely my comfort zone of kind of elaborating and kind of peeling back the onion and understanding the layers and then how to
Yes.
help. So, do you have suggestions for how you would summarize? Let's say you're at one of these events, you're asking questions, and you kind of pinpoint where you might be helpful. What is your lead
Mhm.
in?
Okay. Well, I think the answer is it sort of depends.
Mhm.
Usually, if I'm asking questions like this, at some point someone says to me, I've been talking about myself so much. What do you do? Then I'm saying, okay, if I know that what they've started to say, I can help, I will tell them that.
Mhm.
I will literally just be honest and just say, well, here's the thing. I've heard you say this, this, and this. You've got these
Mhm.
issues.
Yeah.
That's what I do. I help my clients get more clarity around this, build a foundation so that their entire business is much more effective and their marketing works. That's what I do. I don't
Mhm.
ever even say I'm a brand strategist. Nobody knows what that is. So if I say, well, oh, you want to know what I do? I help people do XYZ. That's
Mhm.
what you say.
Yep.
And so that's the thing is you need to know very clearly about the transformation that you provide. What's the problem you're solving? So that's what I would do, I guess. I can't think about it any other way other than to say like, and sometimes people don't give you that entree. They don't say, oh, well, I've been talking all as a what is it that you do? They don't do that. And so you may have to kind of insert yourself. But I kind of think in those situations, this is just me. My part of my core values is that, there's a respect there, a mutual respect. And so if I'm not getting that from that person, they're not my client.
Mhm.
And does that mean that every person at a networking event, you should be thinking about them as a client? No. Sometimes and this is very important too, by the way. I think as far as being a really good networker, you should know that it isn't just about you. And so if you are building the right kinds of strategic partnerships, then you're going to have your eyes and ears open for potentials for them too,
Definitely.
right?
Mhm.
And then I think there's a lot of people, and there's oh, I'll add this here because I think it's important. I have my strategic partners actually do pay referral fees, and I do the same for them.
Yeah.
So it's not so much that I think everything should be thought of in a transactional basis, but I think if I'm going to spend time
Yes.
and thought and really like be analyzing another person to understand what their real problem is and then be thinking, how do I help this person even if it's not me? That's my time. And
Mhm.
as a business owner, I don't have a lot of it. So I'm totally open to paying referral fees. And most of, not everyone, but most of my referral partners do the same.
Mhm.
And that actually makes it more fun, guys.
Yeah.
Like it is, you're like, oh wow, this person actually booked with them. How cool is that? And
Mm.
then you get a little bonus at the end of the month. And who doesn't want that?
Totally, because I'm seeing how that's kind of like that dopamine hit of
Mhm,
all of my efforts are paying off. The connections that I
mhm.
made were worthwhile. I'm at the
Yes,
forefront of this person's mind, and all the things that you're helping people to do, you've done it effectively then. If you've identified the strategic partnership and that
yeah,
person is able to lead somebody that's a great fit to you.
exactly. And here's the other very key point about these strategic partners. I didn't even know we were going to talk about this, but key point about those strategic partners is that they should share your values. I mean, like you really can't just, and I've spent so much time building partnerships here, and I'm not even done yet. Like
Mhm.
I only have a very small number of people right now that I refer others to for specific purposes because in some cases I really haven't found the right partner.
Mhm.
I'll tell you an example. One of my very good client right now, he is he's building out a new practice. He's a practice owner.
Mhm.
He's in the allied medical space, so he's a Chinese medicine practitioner.
Okay.
Okay, and so, but he's also a consultant, so he teaches he helps other medical practices do things better, right? So he's a consultant. He has a book coming out. He is also creating and has created partly a program for other practitioners. So he's doing a lot. He's the multi-passionate entrepreneur, and those are the kind of people I work with the most. So anyway, for him, um, he was actually I've totally lost the track of what I was going to tell you.
Strategic
Oh no.
partnership and how he's a good example of
Yes.
that.
Oh, yes. Okay. So, yes. So, for his practice, he's building a practice from scratch. This is like the third practice he's built from scratch. Yes. And he's like, I want to get back working with patients. Great. At the same time, he's going to, he's building this practice. He's going to be creating content for the group program to show them how to build a practice from scratch. So it's all meta like that, right?
Yeah.
So he comes to us and he says, "Well, listen, I need someone to help me with content and with ads." And so I brought one group in. They didn't do well. They just they dropped the ball in a lot of ways, and I was watching from the sidelines and I'm like nudging them going, "Have you responded to him? Have you done this? Have you, because my values are that like this is like everybody is like a VIP to me. So
Mhm.
why aren't you treating him this way?" And he's very straightforward. He lives in He's a New Yorker, so he's very straightforward. So he
Mhm.
literally like sent them a note back saying, "This isn't working. You haven't done XYZ." And I was like, "Great. Okay. So I'm not going to refer them anymore."
Yeah.
So that's what I mean. Like I'm constantly watching and like, are you treating them well? Are you giving them results? Are they a VIP to you?
So it doesn't just stop with that initial connection and seemingly alignment with values. It's this ongoing, what
Yeah.
is the result? What is the response? Mhm.
Yes. I will follow up with those people I send them over. Like, how's it going over there? And just checking it out. And I don't know, that's why I don't have that many of them, because it's really hard to do that. And I don't, and that's what I mean is like, I think this is it's a strategy that you're using. And
Mhm,
maybe this is a good time to talk about that. Like I think
mhm,
a lot of people are really caught up in the gimmicks and the silver bullet marketing strategies and
mhm,
tactics and things like that. Let's call them tactics. They're not strategies, they're tactics. Um, and I think the problem there is we all think that that's the perfect thing that will work, but because we don't have the other stuff we talked about earlier kind of built in, and we haven't gone down those roads, we're really not sure that those things are going to work, because either we're talking to the wrong audience,
yeah,
or we don't have our messaging dialed in, or the strategy itself, or the tactic itself
yeah.
feels hard and not aligned with who we really are, or we're doing too many of them, or we're starting and stopping and starting a new one and stopping and then starting a new one and stopping. So all of those things I just described, you can avoid every single one of those issues when you do this work first.
Mhm.
I've seen it over and over again. I've seen like people just completely like, oh my God, they had like 5 different, marketing things they were doing. And then suddenly they're like, after we're working together, they're like, oh my God, I don't need to do that, do I? No, you don't. Well,
Yeah.
how much money have you spent on these things? Like that, I have to tell you, I get really passionate and very angry when I hear about how much money is wasted
Yes.
on marketing tactics for people because they have not spent the time to get this done right first. I'm
Mhm.
not mad at them, by the way. I'm mad at all
Of
of the
course.
people coming out saying, this is the only thing you need, and then you're going to make $1 million this year. And
Right?
shut up,
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
know?
That is really helpful. And I also feel like that's kind of a nice summation of you've really highlighted what sets you apart, but you've also given some really key indicators of your own process, what it's like to work with you, but also what somebody could start to do to get some of these things in motion and to
Mhm,
not just solely focus on kind of the next shiny object,
mhm.
tactics, like what is that really rooted in, and is that providing that return on investment that you're looking for, and have you done the work first, work with
Yeah.
somebody like you, or walk through those steps in the process, which
Yeah.
is
I
really
mean,
helpful. So
if
share
you're
with
going
everyone.
to,
Go ahead.
sorry,
That's okay. No,
I
go
was
ahead.
just going to say, if you're going to spend money, you know, there are certain things that, that this is not an expense, it's an investment.
Yeah.
And the tactics are expenses.
Mm-hmm.
So why do you, and sometimes you don't even have to spend money to do the marketing. So like why are you?
That's such an important distinction.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Sometimes you
investment
do.
versus
It
expense.
depends on what we're going to be doing here, but most of the time with the people I work with, they find that I've actually saved them money, massive amounts of money.
I believe it.
Yeah.
So tell everyone about your company and the best way for them to find you, follow along if they're interested in working with you.
Thank you. That's so nice. All right. Well, I think the best way I was toying with this is like dropping a link, and maybe I can give you that a little bit later. I do have a little freebie I could hand out for people if they want that. They can always come and connect with me on LinkedIn. That's the place I spend a lot of time,
Mhm.
really getting to know people, and so I'll give you that link as well. But yeah, I actually have workshops that I do every month
Mhm.
to really kind of help people understand some of these concepts a little bit deeper. So if someone's on my email list, they'll be able to get access to those. So probably one of two ways. It would be like connect with me on LinkedIn, download the freebie, and then you'll be able to be on my list and get access to those workshops.
I love it. Thank you so much for your time today and what you shared and for the work that you do.
Thank you so much for having me. It has been super fun. I can't believe half an hour has gone by.
It flew by.
So quickly. Flew by.
If you like what you're hearing, please rate and review. This will help others find us and benefit as well. The Compassionate Climb podcast represents the opinions of Julia Napini and her guests. The information provided is intended for educational purposes only and should not be taken as legal advice. If that is what you are seeking, please consult an attorney.